Exploring the Arctic, the security risks of China's expanding influence in Greenland amidst international tensions. Introduction. In recent years, the Arctic region has emerged as a focal point of geopolitical competition primarily due to its abundant natural resources and strategic shipping routes. China's growing interest in the Arctic, particularly in Greenland, poses significant security risks against the backdrop of escalating international tensions. This report examines the historical context of China's Arctic ambitions, the security implications of its expanding influence, and the international dynamics at play. Historical context of China's Arctic engagement. China's engagement in Arctic affairs began in the 1990s, evolving from scientific research to a comprehensive strategy aimed at resource exploitation and infrastructural development. The formalization of its Arctic ambitions occurred with the 12th Five-Year Plan in 2011, followed by the publication of its Arctic policy in 2018. Central to this strategy is the Polar Silk Road, which aligns with President Xi Jinping's Belt and Road Initiative, emphasizing commercial development in the Arctic. Security concerns, military capacity building. China's increasing presence in the Arctic has raised alarms among Arctic nations and global powers alike. Reports from the U.S. Coast Guard and international analysts classify China alongside Russia as a dual threat to the established international order. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has characterized the Arctic as a great power competition arena, drawing parallels with China's assertive actions in the South China Sea. This characterization has led to concerns about China's military capabilities in the Arctic, including the construction of icebreakers and advancements in navigational technologies. China's 2015 national security law explicitly prioritizes Arctic exploration, indicating a strategic commitment to military involvement if necessary. Military scholars in China emphasize the need for knowledge accumulation and institutional improvements concerning Arctic governance, highlighting a serious commitment to securing economic interests. Diplomatic maneuvers and international relations. China's strategies also include diplomatic engagement with Arctic nations. It has sought to position itself as a key player in Arctic governance through participation in multilateral forums like the Arctic Council. However, skepticism from Arctic nations, including Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, complicates these diplomatic efforts. Concerns about China's military buildup and intentions have been echoed by the United States and other Arctic countries. Despite aspirations for partnerships, particularly with Russia, mutual skepticism persists regarding military activities in the region. Chinese scholars have recognized the potential for the Arctic to become a new arena for conflict, mirroring broader geopolitical rivalries. Key takeaways and future implications. 1. Commercial and military interests. While primarily focused on commercial development, China is simultaneously enhancing its military capabilities to enforce its perceived rights in the Arctic, reflecting a dual strategy. 2. International dynamics. The Arctic is increasingly viewed as a site of great power competition, with China and Russia seen as challengers to the status quo by Western nations. 3. Legal challenges. China's Arctic strategy is complicated by differing legal interpretations across maritime contexts, which may weaken its claims both in the Arctic and its regional waters. 4. Increased militarization risks. The potential militarization of the Arctic raises concerns about conflict, necessitating careful navigation of international laws and relationships among Arctic states. China's Arctic policy, a security-focused approach. China's Arctic policy has transitioned towards a more security-focused strategy, particularly since 2014. The integration of Arctic interests into the country's five-year plans highlights the increasing significance of the region in China's national agenda. The 13th Five-Year Plan specifically directed resources toward Arctic initiatives, including the construction of new icebreakers and participation in international research. The 2015 National Security Law is pivotal as it explicitly references Arctic exploration and asserts China's rights to explore and utilize Arctic resources. Chinese military scholars advocate for the deployment of military forces to protect national interests, indicating a readiness to use military means if necessary. Strategic implications for the Arctic. China's military investments in Arctic research and navigation underscore the strategic implications of its presence in the region. Research conducted by the People's Liberation Army (PLA) emphasizes the necessity of knowledge accumulation and capacity building for Arctic governance. Joint efforts with civilian organizations illustrate a commitment to enhancing navigational capabilities and maritime surveillance. The Arctic is viewed by some PLA scholars as a burgeoning arena for great power competition. The potential for conflict over resources and shipping routes necessitates a robust Chinese military presence to safeguard national interests. Navigating legal and diplomatic challenges. China's Arctic ambitions must navigate complex legal claims from various Arctic nations. The contrasting interpretations of international law present challenges for Beijing, particularly as it seeks to assert its rights in the Arctic while maintaining claims in contested waters closer to home. China's legal arguments based on the 1920 Svalbard Treaty and the 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea advocate for freedom of navigation in the Arctic. However, accepting claims by Canada or Russia could set precedents that negatively impact China's maritime claims in the South China Sea. Conclusion. China's expanding influence in Greenland and the broader Arctic region introduces significant security risks that warrant careful international scrutiny. The interplay of commercial interests, military capabilities, and diplomatic strategies underscores the complexity of China's Arctic ambitions amidst rising geopolitical tensions. The future of Arctic governance will hinge on how China reconciles its aspirations with the existing geopolitical landscape and adheres to international legal frameworks. As the Arctic continues to be a strategic battleground, the responses from Arctic nations and global powers will shape the region's security dynamics. Ongoing vigilance and strategic diplomacy will be essential in mitigating the risks associated with China's growing presence in this vital part of the world. The content discusses China's expanding influence in Greenland and the Arctic, framing it within the context of international security risks amid geopolitical tensions. Here are some counterintuitive insights identified. 1. China as a non-Arctic state. While China is actively asserting its rights and interests in the Arctic, it does so as a non-Arctic nation. This is counterintuitive because one might assume that only Arctic countries have legitimate claims or interests in the region. However, China contends that its rights to navigation and resource exploration stem from international laws, leading to a complex dynamic where non-Arctic states engage substantively in Arctic governance. 2. Commercial versus military interests. Although China's Arctic strategy seemingly prioritizes commercial development, focused on resources, trade routes, and scientific research, there is a simultaneous buildup of military capabilities. This dual strategy blurs the lines between economic and military objectives, suggesting that China's commercial ambitions are inextricably linked with its security concerns. This contradicts the simplistic view that economic interests do not require military backing. 3. Legal frameworks and contradictions. China's legal interpretations regarding its Arctic ambitions contrast sharply with its stances in the South China Sea, where it adopts a more aggressive posture. This inconsistency presents a paradox. How can a nation advocate for international law in one region while pursuing revisionist approaches in another? This suggests a strategic flexibility that may undermine its legal arguments globally. For military presence as a defensive strategy, the narrative often paints China's military buildup as aggressive. However, Chinese scholars argue that it is primarily a defensive measure aimed at protecting economic interests. This challenges the conventional notion that military enhancement directly correlates with aggressive territorial ambitions, suggesting instead a complex motivation rooted in safeguarding commercial activities. 5. Skepticism towards Russia. Despite China and Russia appearing as strategic partners in Arctic affairs, there is significant mutual skepticism regarding military activities. This contradicts the expectation that two nations with shared interests would uniformly collaborate, revealing layers of geopolitical rivalry even among allies. 6. International cooperation versus competition. While the Arctic is often framed as an area of great power competition, China's actions also reflect a desire for cooperation, especially in scientific research and governance. This duality complicates the narrative of conflict, suggesting that collaboration can coexist with competition, especially in a region characterized by shared environmental and economic interests. 7. Perception of the Arctic as a new Cold War arena. The framing of the Arctic as a potential arena for a new Cold War implies a binary conflict scenario. However, the reality may be more nuanced, with nations seeking to balance competition with cooperative frameworks, particularly in addressing climate change and resource management. 8. Civilian research supporting military objectives. The idea that civilian research can bolster military capabilities is striking. China's scientific endeavors in the Arctic not only serve economic ends but also enhance its military understanding of the region, blurring the lines between civilian and military purposes. This highlights how ostensibly peaceful initiatives can have strategic military implications. In summary, the interplay between China's commercial ambitions and military strategies in the Arctic presents a complex picture that challenges simplistic narratives of aggression and territoriality. The nuanced motivations and legal ambiguities reflect broader geopolitical dynamics that require careful navigation and strategic diplomacy. Exploring the Arctic, the security risks of China's expanding influence in Greenland amidst international tensions. Important content overlooked in the report. 1. China's historical engagement in the Arctic. Many analyses focus on recent developments in China's Arctic strategy, but the historical context is often underappreciated. China's Arctic interests date back to the 1990s, with significant developments in the early 2000s. Recognizing this long-term engagement is crucial, as it illustrates a consistent and strategic approach rather than a sudden interest spurred by current geopolitical dynamics. Significance. Understanding the historical trajectory of China's Arctic ambitions provides insights into its strategic mindset and the depth of its planning. The evolution from scientific research to military considerations highlights that China's approach is methodical, reflecting its broader global aspirations. 2. Dual-use technology and civil-military integration. The report discusses China's military capabilities but often overlooks the implications of dual-use technologies being developed under the guise of civilian research. This includes advancements in navigation and satellite technology that can serve both civilian and military purposes. Significance. Highlighting the dual-use aspect raises concerns about the potential for civilian research initiatives to support military operations. This blurring of lines is critical as it complicates international responses and regulatory frameworks, creating a more nuanced threat landscape in the Arctic. 3. Legal ambiguities and strategic implications. The report touches on China's legal interpretations regarding the Arctic but does not delve deeply into how these interpretations conflict with its positions in other maritime disputes, particularly in the South China Sea. This contradiction could hinder China's legitimacy in asserting its claims in the Arctic. Significance. Analyzing these legal ambiguities reveals the potential vulnerabilities in China's stance, which could be exploited by other nations. It also demonstrates how international law can be a battleground for soft power, shaping perceptions and alliances. 4. China's perception of Arctic governance. The report mentions China's desire to participate in Arctic governance but does not fully explore its vision of an inclusive governance model that contrasts with the traditional views of Arctic states. China advocates for a model that emphasizes shared international interests over sovereignty claims. Significance. This perspective is significant as it aligns with China's broader narrative of multilateralism and could reshape governance structures in the Arctic. If successful, it could lead to a reconfiguration of power dynamics and influence in the region. 5. Impact of international skepticism. While the report notes increased skepticism from Arctic nations towards China's intentions, it does not adequately assess the implications of this skepticism for China's diplomatic efforts. Resistance from Arctic states complicates China's ambitions as they may seek to counterbalance Chinese influence through alliances. Significance: this skepticism could lead to a more fragmented Arctic governance landscape where Arctic nations band together to resist external influences. Such dynamics may intensify geopolitical tensions and affect China's ability to secure its interests. 6. The role of Russia as a strategic partner and competitor. The report correctly identifies Russia as a key player in the Arctic but does not fully explore the complexities of the Sino-Russian relationship. While they share mutual interests, there are underlying tensions and suspicions that could complicate cooperation. Significance: understanding the nuances of the Sino-Russian dynamic is crucial as it affects how both nations pursue their Arctic strategies. Any friction could lead to competitive behavior rather than cooperative engagement, impacting stability in the region. 7. Potential environmental concerns. The report focuses heavily on military and security aspects but overlooks the environmental implications of increased Chinese activity in the Arctic. Given the fragile ecosystem, the implications of resource extraction and infrastructure development are critical. Significance: environmental concerns are not only ethical issues but also security risks. Environmental degradation can lead to geopolitical conflicts over resources and could galvanize international opposition to China's Arctic ambitions, impacting its global image. 8. Global economic implications. The report discusses China's ambitions in the Arctic primarily in terms of security and governance but neglects the broader economic implications for global trade. The Arctic is increasingly viewed as a new frontier for shipping routes and resource extraction. Significance: understanding the economic motivations behind China's Arctic strategy helps contextualize its actions within global trade dynamics. The potential for new shipping routes could alter trade patterns, making Arctic governance a key issue for many nations, not just those in the region. Conclusion: the implications of China's expanding influence in Greenland and the Arctic are multifaceted, involving historical context, legal nuances, dual-use technologies, and the interplay of international relations. Recognizing these overlooked aspects is vital for a comprehensive understanding of the security risks and geopolitical dynamics at play. As the Arctic becomes an arena for great power competition, nuanced analysis will be essential for policymakers aiming to navigate the complexities of this critical region. 1. Dual strategy of commercial and military interests. China's Arctic ambitions are characterized by a dual focus on both commercial development and military capacity building. The Belt and Road Initiative, particularly the Polar Silk Road, highlights China's intent to enhance trade routes and access to resources. However, accompanying this economic strategy is a notable increase in military capabilities, including advancements in icebreaker technology and navigational systems. This dual approach poses significant security risks as China's military presence in the Arctic is perceived as a means to enforce its interests, raising tensions with other Arctic nations and complicating international relations. 2. Great power competition and international dynamics. The Arctic is increasingly seen as a theater for great power competition, with China and Russia viewed as challengers to the established order, particularly by Western nations. Reports from the U.S. Coast Guard and statements from U.S. officials frame the Arctic as a strategic arena akin to the South China Sea. This geopolitical context complicates China's diplomatic efforts as skepticism grows among Arctic nations about its intentions. The balance of power in the region is shifting, necessitating a cautious approach to international diplomacy and cooperation. 3. Legal challenges and interpretations. China's Arctic strategy is further complicated by its interpretations of international law, particularly regarding maritime rights. While China professes adherence to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea UNCLOS in the Arctic, it maintains a contrasting stance in disputes closer to home, such as in the South China Sea. This inconsistency may weaken China's legal arguments in both regions and presents a potential double-edged sword in its quest for influence. Navigating these legal complexities is crucial for China as it seeks to establish itself as a key player in Arctic governance. 4. Potential for militarization and conflict. The increasing militarization of the Arctic raises concerns about potential conflicts, particularly in light of China's military buildup and the strategic importance of the region. The possibility of the Arctic becoming a new arena for geopolitical rivalry echoes historical tensions and suggests that military dynamics could escalate if not carefully managed. This situation necessitates vigilant international oversight and proactive diplomatic efforts to ensure that the Arctic remains a zone of cooperation rather than conflict, highlighting the importance of multilateral engagement and adherence to established norms and laws. In conclusion, China's expanding influence in Greenland and the Arctic presents multifaceted security risks that warrant in-depth analysis and strategic diplomatic efforts to address the complexities of international relations in this critical region. 1. The Suez Canal Crisis. 1956. The Suez Canal crisis emerged from the conflict between Egypt and a coalition of Israel, the United Kingdom, and France. After Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal, a vital international waterway, tensions escalated, leading to military intervention. The crisis highlighted the geopolitical significance of the canal as a trade route and prompted international debates surrounding sovereignty and the rights of nations to control strategic passages. The intervention by Western powers was met with significant pushback from both the Soviet Union and the United States. Reflecting Cold War dynamics. The eventual withdrawal of invading forces showcased the changing balance of power and the rise of non-Western nations in international affairs. 2. The Cuban Missile Crisis. 1962. The Cuban Missile Crisis was a pivotal moment during the Cold War when the U.S. discovered Soviet nuclear missiles stationed in Cuba just 90 miles off the coast of Florida. The crisis brought the world to the brink of nuclear war as the US and Soviet Union engaged in intense negotiations and military posturing. The conflict underscored the security risks associated with superpower competition and the potential for escalation in strategic regions. Ultimately, a negotiated settlement was reached, with the US agreeing not to invade Cuba in exchange for the removal of missiles. Highlighting the importance of diplomacy in de-escalating international tensions. 3. The South China Sea disputes. The South China Sea has been a focal point of geopolitical tension, particularly between China and several Southeast Asian nations as well as the United States. China's expansive territorial claims based on historical maps have been contested by countries like Vietnam, the Philippines, and Malaysia, leading to confrontations and military buildups in the region. The disputes center on issues of sovereignty, resource exploration, and freedom of navigation, with China constructing artificial islands and military installations to assert its claims. The international community, particularly the US, has expressed concern over China's actions, framing them as threats to the rules-based international order, which echoes the security concerns regarding China's increasing influence in the Arctic, particularly in Greenland. Future outlook. Predictions for China's influence in Greenland and the Arctic. As we look to the future, the evolving landscape of Arctic geopolitics, particularly concerning China's influence in Greenland, presents a range of potential scenarios influenced by economic ambitions, security challenges, and international relations. Here are several key predictions regarding China's expanding footprint in Greenland and the broader Arctic region. 1. Economic investments and infrastructure development. China is likely to continue its significant investments in Greenland, focusing on infrastructure development and resource extraction. This will include mining operations, renewable energy projects, and the establishment of trade routes through the Arctic. The Polar Silk Road will gain traction as China seeks to enhance connectivity between Asia and Europe, leveraging Greenland's strategic position. This economic focus could prompt Greenland to strengthen its ties with China, potentially leading to a shift in its political alignment as it seeks financial support and development. 2. Increased military presence and strategic posturing. As China enhances its military capabilities in the Arctic, we can expect an increase in its naval presence in Greenland's waters. This could manifest through the deployment of icebreakers and surveillance vessels aimed at asserting China's interests and securing its economic investments. Such military activities may raise tensions with the United States and its allies, leading to a militarized Arctic region where competition for influence parallels that seen in the South China Sea. 3. Geopolitical tensions and alliances. China's ambitions in Greenland will likely exacerbate existing geopolitical tensions. The US and its Arctic allies, including Canada and Denmark, may respond with heightened military readiness and strategic partnerships to counterbalance China's influence. This could involve enhanced cooperation within NATO and the Arctic Council, as well as increased support for Greenland's self-governance to prevent over-reliance on Chinese investments. The potential for a new Cold War dynamic in the Arctic could emerge, mirroring tensions in other global hotspots. 4. Legal and governance challenges. China's interpretation of international law regarding Arctic navigation and resource rights will face scrutiny. As it navigates the complex legal frameworks governing the Arctic, Beijing may encounter challenges in asserting its maritime claims, particularly against established Arctic nations. The contradictions in China's legal positions in the Arctic versus its claims in the South China Sea may weaken its standing in international forums, complicating its efforts to establish legitimacy for its Arctic ambitions. 5. Environmental considerations and climate change adaptation. With climate change opening new shipping routes and resource opportunities, China's engagement in Greenland could also focus on sustainable practices. As environmental concerns mount, China may seek to position itself as a responsible actor in the Arctic, promoting green technologies and climate adaptation strategies. This could help mitigate criticisms of its activities and enhance its diplomatic standing among other Arctic nations. 6. Indigenous rights and local governance. As Chinese investments grow, there will be increasing pressure from local communities and indigenous groups in Greenland to ensure their rights and interests are represented. Future Chinese engagements may need to incorporate local participation and benefit-sharing mechanisms to avoid social unrest and maintain legitimacy. This could lead to a more nuanced approach to governance, where China collaborates with indigenous populations to align its interests with local needs. 7. Technological advancements and cybersecurity risks. China's technological investments in the Arctic could extend to cybersecurity and surveillance capabilities, raising concerns about data security and espionage. As Greenland becomes increasingly integrated into global supply chains, the risk of cyber threats will grow, prompting Arctic nations to bolster their cybersecurity measures. This technological race could lead to further competition and distrust among Arctic states. 8. Global supply chain resilience and new trade routes. The emergence of new shipping routes due to melting ice will alter global trade dynamics. China's focus on the Arctic will likely lead to increased competition for control of these maritime pathways, impacting global supply chains. Nations will need to adapt to these changes, potentially leading to the reconfiguration of trade alliances and economic partnerships. Conclusion. The future of China's influence in Greenland and the Arctic region is poised for significant developments marked by economic ambitions, military considerations, and complex geopolitical dynamics. Navigating these challenges will require strategic diplomacy, adherence to international norms, and collaboration with Arctic nations. The outcomes will shape not only the Arctic's future but also the broader landscape of international relations in an increasingly multipolar world. As China positions itself as a key player in the Arctic, the interplay between cooperation and competition will define its path forward.